Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bibliophila, where I discuss books that inspire us, enrich our minds and broaden our mental horizon. Let's begin today's episode with a review of yet another book. Today, I'll be talking about a book, To Sir with Love by E.R. Braithwaite. This book is a 1957 autobiographical novel that revolves around the racial intolerance and the oppression of the blacks even in post-war cosmopolitan England. In modern-day European nations, the author had expected to get a more welcoming and tolerant attitude from the society, but instead he was forced to accept the racial abuses hurled at him because of his dark skin complexion. Some years prior to the beginning of the novel, the author had been denied an engineering job because the heads were not ready to accept a black man over the white sweat applied for the job. This reminded Braithwaite the long-forgotten disadvantages of his dark skin complexion. And from then on, he had struggled to find paid jobs, even though he was a very accomplished person in the field of electrical engineering. Once, while traveling in a bus, a white woman simply refused to sit beside him because of his dark skin complexion. This represents the illogical racial prejudices that some people hold even to this day. Finally, Braithwaite got an appointment in Greenslade Secondary School under Mr. Florian. The school did not have a good reputation, located in a noisy, littered street surrounded by an irregular, untidy picket fence of slipshod shop fronts and gaping bomb sites. The children there were not the orderly, obedient and respectable students that Braithwaite had imagined. Instead, they were uncouth, disrespectful and careless. On his first day as a teacher, Braithwaite had a shocking experience. The students never addressed the teachers as sir or miss. From outside the classroom, I could hear sounds of talk, laughter and movement. I went in and walked directly to my desk, seated myself and waited. The children were standing about in groups and had paid no attention to my entrance, but gradually the groups dispersed and they seated themselves. I waited until everyone was quietly settled, then called the attendance register. Their replies to their names were mostly mumbles or grunts, with here or there a yep or here. One boy answered, "Here, sir," and this promptly provoked a chorus of jeers from boys and girls alike, in resentment at his backlegging their agreed action. The boys were scruffier, coarser and dirtier than any he had seen before. Many of the girls washed themselves only once a week and wore the same sanitary napkin for days on end. Later on, the author would come to know that water in their homes was more likely to be found in the walls and floor instead of in the wash basin. In some cases, water for a family had to be fetched by bucket or pail from a single backyard tap that served 5 to 6 families. These children were forced to work, earn and take care of their overlarge families in addition to attending school. Mr. Florian wanted his students to love to learn and work instead of being forced to do so. He instructed his teachers to be affectionate and lenient with their pupils because many of them came from homes where an order was invariably accompanied by a blow. They may use bad language in front of their friends, but if they try to use it in the presence of their siblings or parents, they would get a clip on the ear. In some cases, these children were the sole breadwinners of their families. Such was the dire condition of post-war cosmopolitan England. The students were supposed to write a week's account in their diaries on every Friday, but Mr. Braithwaite noticed that apart from labeling him as the new black teacher, they disregarded him completely. The students seemed determined to make their teacher resign and thus defy authority. Moving on from their inattentive stage, they came upon the noisy treatment stage. In some lessons where reading or talking to the pupils was of utmost importance, someone would lift the lid of a desk and let it fall with a loud bang. One or two such interruptions was enough to destroy the planned continuity of a lesson. Matters came to a head when some girls threw a used sanitary napkin in the grate and made an attempt to burn it. The author was filled with disgust and gave his children a heated lecture on the importance of good manners, cleanliness and concentration. He instructed his pupils to address all the girls as Miss and himself as Sir. The other teachers, namely Miss Phillips, Mrs. Dale Evans, Mrs. Drew and Miss Blancard, were considerate with his attempts to gain his students' confidence and trust. Gradually, the students began to respect him and appreciate his efforts to educate them. They began to be more attentive, obedient and enthusiastic in their study. Once Mr. Braithwaite and Miss Blancard took the students on a trip to the Victoria and Albert Museum. It was for me a pleasant and revealing experience. I had not supposed that the children would have shown so much interest in historical events. Weston had even hinted that their enthusiasm for this outing was just one more excuse to get away from anything concerned with education. Yet here they were, keenly interested, asking the sort of questions which clearly showed that they had done some preparatory work. They took the whole thing quite seriously, sketching, making notes, discussing it in undertones. After they returned to the school, the students presented Mr. Braithwaite with a large bouquet of flowers for giving them the day of their lives. Many of them had never left their work and home to go somewhere for recreation, and this trip to the museum had overwhelmed them. Some days later, Mr. Braithwaite and Miss Blancard went to a cafe. The waiter came forward and directed us to our table with a questioning glance at me. We sat down and chatted quietly, both of us very much aware of the special something between us, recognized but waiting to be acknowledged. Eventually, we both realized that the service was being exceptionally slow, especially to our table, for other diners seemed to have waiters hovering around them all the time. Presently, a waiter brought us a bill of fare, which he placed on the table and departed. Annoyance was large in Gillian's eyes, but I took it up and we spent a little time carefully choosing the food. The waiter returned and took our order, his manner casual with an implied discourtesy, and he was so long returning that I became really uneasy and annoyed. What was the fellow playing at? He came at last with the soup. Whether by accident or design, some of the soup was spilled from my plate onto the cloth. I sat back expecting that he would do something about it as good service demanded, but he merely stood there looking at me with a faint sneer on his face. Gillian reacted suddenly. With a swift movement, she gathered up her gloves and handbag. "Let's go, Rick." This explains the racial intolerance and the oppression that the blacks had to face even in modern-day cosmopolitan England. Finally, on the half-yearly report day, the students presented Mr. Braithwaite with a large parcel labeled "To Sir with Love." E.R. Braithwaite had done everything possible to prove himself as capable a man as a white person, and at the same time lent out a hand to those poor children lost in their struggle for survival. With dedication, love and courage, he had turned uncouth pupils into respectable, obedient adults. To Sir with Love was adapted into a 1967 film starring Sidney Poitier. This book is a must-read as it explains the discrimination, segregation, oppression and racial intolerance that the blacks had to face even in post-war cosmopolitan England. This book represents the fact that if we have confidence, courage and determination, we can accomplish even the impossible. I sincerely hope that you have liked this analysis of the book To Sir with Love by E.R. Braithwaite. If you have, please do not forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. I have provided the links of my previous videos in the description below so that you may watch them. I'll be back again with an analysis of yet another book. Till then, happy reading!